I'm going to talk about Banksia Woodlands, a Perth icon, and if you look in the middle of that slide you'll see one of the 7 major trees of Perth, which is Jarrah, which is probably also another Perth icon, and of course that was the tree that Mrs. Dance walked up to, ignoring the firewood Banksias and other things around it, and chopped down to commence Perth. Banksia is part of the Proteaceae. The Proteaceae are one of the great southern hemisphere families. It's one of the 3 biggest families of flowering plants in Australia. If you look at Banksia without Dryandra, there's about 80 species in total, and there are 63 of these in southern Western Australia. So it's a big genus and a very diverse group. The distinctive features of Banksia is, of course, that they have a cone. The flowers are, like many Australasian flowers, don't rely on having large, soft petals. We live in a harsh, arid environment, and what they tend to have are very hard flowers, many flowers as the attractive unit that operates as a single pollination unit, or like a single flower. The other features, of course, are the woody follicles where the seeds hang out in, and the winged seeds. The Proteaceae are an ancient group. They arose before the demise of the dinosaurs. The first indications of Proteaceae are found in the fossil record of about 70 million years ago. Without a doubt, it would appear as if the adaptations to drought and poor soils, because they think these hard leaves are really adaptations to poor soils as much as drought, were present in Western Australia from some 40 or 50 million years ago. And the real crunch is the fact that we also have Banksia cones from 38 million and 47 million years ago. One of the reasons I would say they're an icon for our state is that they are a very ancient Western Australian. They've been around and doing their thing for a very long time, and very successfully. Banksias form on sands and sandy gravels between the 300 to 900 millimetre rainfall systems in the southwest, and that is one reason why they do so well around Perth. They are largely defined on the component species. The structure of them is fairly similar. They're all low woodlands essentially. But they do come out in quite different floristic community types, and these are the ones that have been used to define the threatened species. This is one of the commonest ones, Banksia attenuata menziesii central woodlands. That's the one in Wandie, which is again a fairly common community, often has Jarrah within it. But these differ essentially in the low plants that are within them. And this is one of the threatened ones. Incredibly species-rich communities, up to 70 or 80 species per 100 square metres. And these are on the foothills, and these are highly cleared, 90+% cleared. That's in the Greater Brixton Regional Park, and that's one of the lower, wetter Banksia attenuata communities. So the Banksia Woodlands, and as I've said, there's 7 really major trees on the coastal plain in the Perth area: attenuata menziesii, the hollyleaf Banksia, Banksia grandis, littoralis, Prionotes, which stops literally around Bold Park here largely. There's one population on Point Walter to the south of the river, and up on the Dandaragan Plateau, Banksia burdettii often comes in. Banksia grandis is a common Jarrah forest species. It's relatively common on the plain, but it never forms a woodland community by itself, even though it is much loved by some of our well-loved brethren who tend to destroy it quite happily. Banksia licifolia, which does form a few communities, but is a declining species on the plain now that because it likes wetter, damper sites. It's quite susceptible to phytophthora and climate changes. This is probably the one which will threaten the most. And Banksia littoralis is probably the other species that will be most threatened by climate change. Very susceptible to fire. But the big ones, of course, is Banksia menziesii. It's firewood Banksia, which is a terrible name for such a beautiful plant. The flowers are actually held in tension here, and when a bird probes it, they pop open. So it's a system that's very highly adapted to its pollinators. And Banksia attenuata, the candlestick Banksia. Those are the 2 iconic Banksias in the Banksia woodlands around Perth, the species that form the majority of Banksia woodlands. Banksia menziesii is the most variable of any Banksia in terms of its natural flower colour. It has numerous flower forms. The commonest one is this yellow one, which is almost certainly a single gene, use in cut flowers when you've got such a big range of colour. As you can see, the northern ones tend to have as many flowers despite being small, and they in fact set more seed. When you grow Menziesii down here, the shrub form stays as a shrub and never forms a tree. Flowering is not keyed on day length, flowering is keyed on temperature and radiation. So if you think about shifting these around the place, you won't have problems with day length, but you'll sure have problems with getting them to flower at times or to get the set flowering. They basically don't flower together. Attenuata comes into flower when Menziesii is finished and vice versa. These keep the honey eaters, which are the pollinators, going during the year. Essentially, Banksia attenuata is keyed on when the days reach 17.8 degrees, and Menziesii is when they drop below 24 degrees. And also changes in the degree of ambient radiation that they receive, in other words, sunlight. They're actually keyed to an arid environment, which has about 6 seasons, like the Noongar said, not about 2 or 3 like we're perhaps used to. These species can form hybrids, but the differential flowering periods, they do have the same sorts of pollinators, but the differential flowering periods keep them separate. Both of them have buds under the bark, epicomic buds. Both of them are multi-stem shrubs to the north. Both of them release their seed in winter after the fire. They'll only release with a series of wetting and drying events so that they don't chuck their seeds out in the middle of summer when they'll just cook and die. Banksia attenuata is much more fire resistant than Menziesii, and both of them don't like being burnt in spring. Banksia, the tree in the community, which are, I think, the iconic plants of Perth. They're the things that define the coastal plain, but they still continue to be underappreciated. They unfortunately now grow in the places we want to use for housing. They do have major issues with fire, weeds and soil nutrition changes, which are some of the major drivers of loss of Banksias through the landscape. And disturbance is probably also a major driver that may cause unintended consequences.